Hello, my name is Owen, and as part of my end of the year wrap up, I want to give you guys the top books that I read this year. I'm going to be giving you a small ranking. I was going to rank every single book that I read, but then I realized I didn't want to talk about the many books that I just thought were okay. So I decided on the top 8 also because I couldn't just pick 5 books to talk about and I couldn't pick 10 books that I really want to talk about. So we did 8. All right, enough explaining. It's boring. Going on to number 8, jumping straight into it, we have Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. I read this book towards the beginning of the year, and it was really my first foray into like modern like romance novels. Obviously, I'd heard of the movie with Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer. Yikes. But I hadn't seen the movie, and obviously I hadn't read the book, so I thought I'd give it a chance. And one of the things that I loved about this book was how immersive the setting was. Like, I really felt like I could picture and I could smell and I could feel that Italian countryside. And it seems like such a perfect way to live, man. Like, if I had to like retire anywhere, that's where it would be. And also, I think the dynamic between obviously like Elio and Oliver is like super complex and super interesting. And like Elio's character, where he's like just obsessed with this Oliver guy, and it's not clear like whether or not it's like reciprocated in the beginning or like how much is reciprocated and like what's Oliver think throughout the whole thing. And I just thought it was a great character study into like what like love is and how it could like get twisted into like something else. And while I would say like the epilogue or like the latter half was kind of jarring with like the time jump, I found it like actually kind of sweet that it just didn't end on like the worst, like them separating, stuff like that. So I actually did like the ending and like the time jump of seeing them as adults. I thought it was kind of sweet that we got like closure in that way. But overall, I really like this book. And like I said, it was my first foray into like that modern romance, and I really enjoyed it. So I think it's a genre that I will dip my toe into more often in the future. Going to number 7, we have the first of 2 Frederick Bachman books in this list, A Man Called Ove. This is the first Bachman book that I read, and I saw like Murphy Napier, the other booktuber. She loves this book, and I was interested by it, so I checked it out, and I did love this book. It did make me tear up at the end. Ove is just such a curmudgeon. That's the best way to describe him, but Bachman, as always, like his characters are just so simple in like the most endearing way, and you understand this man and through his backstory and just through the way he acts. It's just like he's so mean, but he's mean in a way that's like, oh, Ove, you mean little man. But it's just sweet, and I don't know, I just love this book. I think it's super wholesome, and like the ending, like I said, just makes you tear up. So, and it's a short book too, so if you're interested, check it out. It's a great book. Moving to number 6, we have A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. I've talked about this book a couple times in the channel, and it is my favorite of A Song of Ice and Fire. Again, I haven't read Dance of Dragons yet. I'll get to it eventually. But I thought this book was the most action-packed, dense, I guess like compact, not dense. Dense sounds bad. But it just like constantly the biggest things were happening every single chapter, where I was just like on the edge of my seat the entire time. Like, it's the pinnacle of suspenseful fantasy, and I loved it. And like I said countless times, I love Jaime Lannister, so like the fact that he gets a little bit more time to shine in this book compared to the other ones, it's fantastic. And if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, the show, I'll say it 1,000 times, read the books, because while the first 2 books are like basically scene for scene, page per page, the exact same, it's still great, man. And Storm of Swords is the pinnacle for that. Moving in at number 5, we're in the top 5 now. We're back to Bachman with Beartown, the first book in the Beartown trilogy, which I became a fan of this year, and I was able to catch up right before the newest, the 3rd book, The Winners, came out just a couple months ago. But Beartown is the first one in the trilogy, and it's similar to Ove, where like the characters are super charismatic and super like easy to get invested in, except this one I felt like, compared to Man Called Ove and like Anxious People, the characters in Beartown are a lot more rounded, and they're less like surface level. And I talked about in my review of like the entire trilogy, where Bachman does a good job of like giving characters one trait so that you know like how they will act in every situation. And while that is true, it doesn't mean that they're simple. characters. It just means that like they're easy to understand and connect with in a very fast way, I guess is the best way to describe it. But these are characters that are going through like the worst possible situations, like these constantly get beat up, like the characters in this book. I don't think hardly any of them ever catch a break, and it's tragic, but it's heartwarming because all the books end at least some form of a positive note, and there's great morals here, there's great messages here, and these are some of like the favorite characters that I've read in fiction because they're just so relatable and they're so human, which I guess is like the bottom line of all Bachman books is like his characters, as simple as they may be in some cases, they are human, and we could see either ourselves or people we know in them. And this is just like the most, in my opinion, the most well-rounded story that I've read of Bachman so far. And it's a fantastic start to the trilogy. And while I love the whole trilogy, it does not get better than the first book, Beartown. So that's my number 5. Number 4, we have The End of Eternity by Isaac Asimov. This is the first sci-fi book I ever read, and I was blown away with this book. I loved it so much, like the complexity of like the transversing thousands and millions of years in human history, and just like the fact that authors like obviously Asimov in particular in this book just like can develop entirely new human cultures based on the time period and like the time travel, how it's explained itself, and like this guy's job. It's just crazy. And like I have a full review of the channel, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but the twist at the end with one of the characters, it just like ties it all together. And I remember reading, like first starting the book, I'm like, okay, this is kind of overwhelming. It's like too sciencey, which I like, but sometimes it gets a little bit too much. And then it just all comes together. And once that domino falls, it's a race to the finish, and it's fantastic. So it was a great jumping off point for sci-fi if you're not into the genre yet, or at least it was for me. And I really, really enjoyed it, and just how fun of a time I had reading this book, and just like the message behind it. Like I think the best science fiction, I said it before, is based in like realism. Like obviously this one's like so far-fetched, but also like has a moral behind it. And some of the best sci-fi books I've read so far have had that, and this is like the foundation of that for me. So I really liked it. That's my number 4, End of Eternity. Number 3, we have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is another like romance book that I read this year, so I was really jumping into the genre. Daphne du Maurier is more of a classic author. She wrote in like the 1930s, I believe. But Rebecca, I thought it was going to be a little bit more romance-based, but in reality, it's more of a thriller. Like it's like edge of your seat, because like you're with our main character, and she's just haunted by Rebecca this entire time. And even though she's long dead from the start of the book, I was just waiting for the pin to drop where she like comes out of the closet and just like starts like whacking people. Because that's how scared du Maurier makes you of like this person who's not around. And the main character is horrified of her, and you're horrified of her. Just like her reputation is larger than life. Everybody loved her. She was so intimidating, and she's dead, and you're still intimidated her from beyond the grave. And you're just like, what's going to happen? Is she going to come back? Like, what happened to her? I don't know what's going on. I will say, this is like, obviously it's my top 3, but like if you haven't gone to Mandalay, the manor, I encourage you to go read this book. It's very, it's another like suspenseful novel, like I said, like The Storm of Swords, edge of your seat, thriller, a little bit of romance, but it's mostly just about like Rebecca, man. She haunts this book, and I can't wait to read more du Maurier. I loved her writing style, very easy to read, very fun to read. So that's my number 3. Moving into number 2, we have a book I talk about endlessly on this channel. It's The Bonehunters by Steven Erikson. It's a book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which obviously I love incredibly, and I am currently reading Night of Knives, so I'm still jumping back into the Malazan world. But The Bonehunters was my favorite book of that 10-book saga. I've said it again. I've said it before. I'll say it again. This book is 2 books in one, with the climaxes of the most epic fantasy scale you have ever seen. If you like fantasy, this is one of the best fantasy books you'll ever read. It's just absolutely fantastic. The scale of this book, obviously, it's supported by the first 5 books in the series, but I don't know, man. It's just the action set pieces are so good, and obviously Erikson just kills it with the deeper narrative, the deeper themes, as well as like the characters that you just grow so attached to that you know that they could just like be incinerated at any moment, but, you know, in Malazan. Death is a little different, in case you haven't read it. Just kind of like a little bit of a teaser. I don't know why I felt I need to tease that now, but I don't know. There are stakes, don't get me wrong. But this book was just incredible, and you got to read Malazan. Malazan, if you haven't already, and the Bonehunters is the creme de la creme. It's the best one, and I'm reading Night of Knives, as I said, and I'm already itching. I'm itching to get a reread in. Let's see if I can hold off. I probably can't, though. Moving into our number one, or my number one, I don't know who we is. The number one book that I read in 2022, drum roll please. The Count of Monte Cristo. Let's get it out here. Congratulations, congratulations. Alexander Dumas, The Count of Monte Cristo. I'm really interested in like classic literature, so I try to hit all of like the most popular, or I'm trying to get to them eventually. So I heard good things about this one. I heard it's like action-y, like, I don't know. I just heard good things in general. I don't know if I heard specific things about it, but I'm like, okay, I saw this cool version at Barnes & Noble. It's a little long. I started it. It's like very verbose, very wordy. I'm like, okay, classic novel, here we come. And I was like getting flashbacks to like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where he just talks about fish for pages and pages and pages until we finally get to the interesting stuff. And it's just like, I was reading this book, the first couple hundred pages, and he's giving me like backstories of characters who were like the servants to the servant of like the main character. I'm like, okay, classic literature, right? But then I realized that I am the biggest idiot of all time, because this book is so deliberate. And I said this in my original review, but I'll say it again. Every word in this book is essential to the plot and to the story. And the fact that I learned that there's an abridged version. How do you make an abridged version of a perfect book? That's what I asked you. And you probably won't have an answer, because there is no good one. But this book is action-packed, and it has that deeper meaning. And apparently, like, the movie makes it more of like a classic, like, action movie, where it's about like revenge, and then he gets his revenge and he saves the day, happy ever after. Like, this book is not that. It is about revenge, about this man getting revenge, but the costs of revenge and what that does to someone's psyche. And it's just like, obviously the Count is like such an interesting character, but like it's a different character than the man you start off with Dante's at the beginning. It's just a different man, and it's fascinating, like getting to meet both of them. And I don't know. I love this book. It's my favorite classic book of all time now. And it's just fantastic. So if you haven't checked it out, this is my number one book of 2022. I recommend you guys check it out. And also let me know what was your favorite book of this year? Because like I said, there's countless things to read. So instead of me reading Malazan again, give me a reason not to, perhaps. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you like the video. It really helps me a lot, guys, and I really appreciate all your support and you guys watching the videos and leaving your comments. It means a lot to me, and you guys make it a lot of fun for me to do stuff like this, so I appreciate it. That's all I got for you guys. Have a good day.